If you're born in a capitalist country, you're born in sin. That was the gospel according to Jim Jones, the man who would one day lead over 900 people to their deaths in the middle of a jungle. But before Jonestown was a massacre, it was a dream, a promise, a utopia for the poor, the broken, and the forgotten. And Jim Jones? He wasn't just their preacher. He was their savior, their God. Jones didn't start as a monster. In fact, in 1950s Indiana, he looked like the future of hope. He preached racial integration in segregated churches. He adopted non-white children. He fed the poor. People called him a prophet of justice. He called his movement the People's Temple, a place where everyone was equal under God regardless of race or class. He wept in his sermons. He healed the sick. He kissed the feet of the broken. But behind the miracles, there was performance. Behind the tears, there was control. As the temple grew, so did his appetite for power. He moved his followers from Indiana to California, promising a better life, a life away from persecution and corruption. By the early 1970s, he had thousands of followers, doctors, teachers, mothers, veterans, all handing over their money, families, and minds to him. And they didn't just worship God anymore. They worshiped Jones. Not as a pastor, but as a divine being. He claimed to be able to raise the dead, to read minds, to see into the future. And if you dared question him, you weren't questioning a man. You were questioning salvation. Slowly, dissent became a sin. Doubt became treason. And privacy? That didn't exist in the People's Temple. Jones once said, "What you need to believe in is what you can see. If you see me as your friend, I'll be your friend. If you see me as your father, I'll be your father. If you see me as your God, I'll be your God." And most of them believed. Blindly. Desperately. Completely. But the gospel of Jim Jones wouldn't lead to heaven. It would lead them 7,000 miles away into a sweltering jungle, where paradise would rot into paranoia, and love would become a weapon. Because the Church of Jim Jones was never about God. It was about obedience. And obedience was just the beginning. By 1974, Jim Jones no longer trusted America. The media had started poking holes in his miracles. Former temple members were speaking out. Whispers of abuse, manipulation, and staged healings were growing louder. To Jones, criticism wasn't a challenge, it was an attack on divinity. He needed a place beyond the reach of journalists, defectors, and democracy. So he looked south, to the dense jungles of Guyana, a small, socialist-leaning country in South America. There, hidden from the eyes of the world, he promised his followers a new Eden, Jonestown. It was supposed to be a sanctuary, a self-sufficient commune built on equality, hard work, and peace. No racism. No capitalism. No hate. Only love and loyalty. The temple bought thousands of acres of land, and slowly believers packed their bags and left behind their homes, their families, their doubts. They boarded planes not knowing they would never come back. Jones described Guyana as the promised land. But what awaited them was a cleared-out patch of jungle, blistering heat, and impossible labor. Children woke at dawn to farm in the mud. Elderly followers hauled wood and carried water under armed watch. There were no hospitals. No comfort. No escape. And Jim Jones? He didn't sweat in the fields. He sat in a throne-like chair, high on tranquilizers and amphetamines, his voice blaring over loudspeakers from morning to night. Preaching. Ranting. Repeating. They want to kill us. The enemy is coming. We must protect ourselves. Every corner of Jonestown had eyes. Armed guards called the Red Brigade patrolled the jungle. Letters were censored. Visitors were watched. Enemies of the temple were publicly shamed. You couldn't cry. You couldn't leave. You couldn't think. And still many smiled. What? Because Jones made them believe the outside world was worse. He told them America was run by Nazis. That the CIA wanted them dead. That black people would be put back in chains. That Jonestown was the last free place on earth. So they worked harder. They obeyed louder. They silenced their doubts. Because in Jonestown, to question Jim Jones was to question your very survival. But the walls were closing in. And soon, a visit from the US government would ignite the horror that Jones had long been preparing for. At first glance, Jonestown looked like a socialist utopia. Children played in the dirt while parents worked the fields. There were schools, songs, slogans of unity painted on wooden boards. They called each other comrade. They shared meals and marched to chants of equality. But behind the smiles was a machine of fear, running day and night, powered by obedience, silenced by dread. Every word, every whisper, every sideways glance was monitored. There were no phones, no newspapers, no outside voices. Only the scratchy, hypnotic ramblings of Jim Jones echoing through loudspeakers, 24 hours a day. His voice never stopped. Even when they slept, he spoke. And he didn't preach anymore. He warned. He threatened. He drilled them. Jonestown wasn't a commune. It was a prison built in paradise. Jones feared defection more than death. Anyone who tried to escape was labeled a traitor. Some were tied up, drugged, or locked in a cage known as the box, a dark, underground pit where screams were swallowed by dirt. Children were told to report on their parents. Husbands on wives. Trust was poisoned. Intimacy replaced with paranoia. And then came the White Nights. Jones would wake the commune in the dead of night and call them to the pavilion, his throne at the center of Jonestown. There, under flickering lanterns and rifles, he'd announce the unthinkable. We are under attack. The enemy is coming. Tonight we die together. And he'd hand out cups. Sometimes they were filled with flavored water. Sometimes they weren't. But no one ever knew. These were rehearsals for death. Tests of loyalty. And every time his followers drank. Not because they wanted to die, but because not drinking meant betrayal. Some were terrified. Some were brainwashed. Most were just exhausted. They had no passports. No money. No strength. Only a dream that had decayed into surveillance, control, and silent suffering. And yet they still called him Dad. Still cheered when he limped onto the pavilion. Still believed, or pretended to. Until one day someone didn't pretend. A handful of temple defectors made it out and reached the U.S. government. A congressman took interest. And in November 1978, a plane landed near Jonestown with an American official on board. What followed next would seal their fate. November 17, 1978. A small plane lands near the jungle outpost of Jonestown. On board is Congressman Leo Ryan from California, one of the only U.S. politicians brave enough to investigate the rumors. He came with a film crew, a few journalists, and concerned family members of temple followers. They had heard whispers, torture, starvation, psychological abuse, forced imprisonment. Jones welcomed them with a smile and a performance. The visitors were given a tour. Children sang. Women smiled. Food was served. Everyone called it heaven. And Jim Jones? He played the role of benevolent father, slurring from drugs but still sharp enough to charm the cameras. At first, everything seemed fine. Too fine. But then, quietly and with shaking hands, a note was slipped to a journalist. Help us get out. And then another. And another. Suddenly, the perfect picture cracked open. A dozen temple members begged to leave with the congressman. Jones's mask began to slip. His voice changed. His eyes darkened. He saw betrayal. November 18, 1978. The defectors and the congressman's group headed back to the nearby airstrip at Port Kaituma. Two small planes awaited. Rain fell. The mood was tense. But just as they were boarding, a tractor pulling armed temple guards arrived. What happened next was sudden and brutal. Gunfire. Congressman Leo Ryan was shot multiple times and killed on the spot. The first and only U.S. congressman ever assassinated in the line of duty. A cameraman was killed. A reporter. A fleeing woman. A child. One of the planes was riddled with bullets. Survivors crawled into the jungle, bleeding. Back in Jonestown, Jim Jones was listening. He already knew the mission had failed. The government would come now. There would be no way out. No more lies to spin. No more time to run. So he called an emergency meeting at the pavilion. The speakers crackled to life. His voice was calm, slow, deliberate. My love for you is endless. And if we can't live in peace, then let us die in peace. This time it wasn't a white knight rehearsal. This time the cups were real. And the poison was ready. November 18, 1978, late afternoon. The pavilion was full. Mothers held babies. Children played in the dust. Men stood with arms crossed, silent, eyes fixed on the stage. Jim Jones took his seat, hunched, drugged, but eerily focused. Before him sat tubs filled with a deadly cocktail, flavor aid mixed with cyanide, Valium, and tranquilizers. A tape recorder was running. It would capture the last 45 minutes of Jonestown. His voice crackled through the speakers. We didn't commit suicide. We committed an act of revolutionary suicide protesting the conditions of an inhumane world. His followers listened and obeyed. The poison was handed out in paper cups. Children were the first. Some cried. Some resisted. But many drank because their mothers were whispering, "It's okay. Just go to sleep." Parents fed the poison to infants through syringes. Some cradled their children until their breathing stopped. Then they stood, walked to the tubs, and drank their own dose. There was no screaming. Only the hum of Jones's voice. Only the groans of the dying. Those who hesitated were pushed forward by guards. A few tried to run. Some were injected forcibly. And as the bodies fell, layer upon layer, the jungle grew silent. Jones watched it all from his chair. He didn't drink the poison. Instead, he shot himself in the head, alone, the coward's end for a man who called himself God. By nightfall, 918 people were dead. 304 were children. Whole families collapsed together, arms around each other, mouths stained purple. The next morning, when Guyanese soldiers arrived, what they found was so overwhelming that some broke down sobbing. A sea of corpses in brightly colored clothes. A dead man with a megaphone. And the remains of an impossible lie. Jonestown was supposed to be salvation. But it became a symbol of how blind faith, isolation, and unchecked power can consume everything, even love. Even life. Jim Jones didn't just take lives, he stole minds. And in the end, he proved that the most dangerous weapon in history is belief. History doesn't repeat itself, but it whispers, quietly, patiently, waiting for us to forget. If this story made you think, feel, or question, then like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe for more forbidden chapters they never taught you in school. Because the past isn't dead, it's just buried. And we're here to dig it up.